Hi, everyone. Today we're going to talk about three strategies to promote independent reading. My name is Alicia Gorley. I teach ninth and 11th grade English at Hickman County High School. Most of my sources today have come from Ernest Bond's literature and the young adult reader. So, the objective for this PD is to equip you with strategies to engage with students and promote independent reading through book talks, book tastings, and book generators. So, first, we're going to talk about each of these three strategies, what it is, and what is the purpose of them, and how they can be implemented into your library program. And then, lastly, we're going to talk about the impact. Why does it matter? And how can you start creating these independent readers in your school today with these strategies? So, first up is book talks, a rewarding alternative to traditional book reports. So, the first chapter of Ernest Bond's Literature and the Young Adult Reader had a heavy focus on book talks, what they are, how to implement them, and what they should look like in the school system. The book states that a book talk typically involves introducing the book and why it is a compelling read without revealing too much about the plot. Now, Joni Richards Bobart was referenced in the text as an expert on book talking, and she had a long, in depth description of what this looked like. But I really wanted you to see how she decided what literature, what YA literature specifically, to share with her students. She says she always looks for the best. She's looking at titles with strong characters that she knows her audience will feel a connection with, a plot that will interest them, and a dynamic writing style that will intrigue them. So, when giving a book talk to your students, whether you are the librarian or the classroom teacher, there are some elements that you want to consider. You want to make sure, of course, that you mention the title, the author, and you display the cover. You're probably going to want to do that more than once because we know how students are. They are definitely going to need that information repeated, especially if you do a good enough job and catch their interest with the book you're discussing. You want to keep the talk relatively short. As with anything, change, movement in the classroom when talking to young people is good. They have a pretty short attention span most of the time. And if you're not giving away too many details as you don't want to do, it's going to be pretty short anyway, a few minutes at most, giving them that little sneak peek of what to expect in this book, maybe reading just enough of the first chapter to keep them wondering, to keep them guessing. And while I don't always believe you have to do a ton of prep work for book talks, I think that it helps if it's a book that you are familiar with and that maybe you've read or that you know enough about that you can really sell it. And of course, books that you love and that you've read, you're going to be more passionate about talking about those books and sharing those with students. And we know that that is contagious, that students pick up on that, that they will gravitate towards a book, towards you, if they can truly feel that authentic passion when you're discussing this book. So, of course, when we talk about YA literature, there are some components that are important to ensure that the book would be of interest to your students. It needs to have relatable characters to deal with themes that are relevant to a young person. Um, Maybe there are times where you're going to have to get more into the new stuff that has been released, and it's not always possible to read every single book, but you've got to know what's being released, and you have to know your students and know what they're going to care about reading. Okay, the benefits of book talks are numerous, as discussed in the book, and as just you could think about when you think about a culture of reading. Of course, talking about books is going to have a positive influence, but it engages young readers in a new and fresh way. It encourages a culture of reading. And my favorite benefit of a book talk that I've had the opportunity to witness is the way that it allows all members of a school to participate in this opportunity, whether it's the principal, the school secretary, the SRO, parents of some of your students. If you can create that culture of reading and you know that you have readers within your building and you know that they would be willing to share with your students, that is just going to be amazing for students to see. So anyone can talk about a book. It doesn't just have to be the librarian. It isn't just the English teacher. And that is, I think, what has the potential to be the most changing, um, will have the most change for our students in the future. So Joni Richards Bodart is stated again as that watching kids hang on every word, scribble down titles, come up to snatch up the books afterward is a rush that can't be forgotten. And I've thankfully had the privilege to witness that as well. And I could not agree more with her statement. If you do it right and you do it well and you create that culture, you are going to catch some kids' interest and they are going to want to know what you're talking about. Okay, next up, second strategy, book tastings. Very similar to book talks, as you're going to see, but flipped a little bit where the students are able to interact with the book in a more tangible way. So, book tastings are kind of what they sound like. It's where students are able to quote unquote taste multiple books in a short amount of time in the hopes that one of those books or multiple of the books that they interact with are going to pique their interest. And so this can be done anywhere. Book tastings can be done in a classroom. I think they're best done in the library personally. That's where I've had the opportunity to see them completed. And that goes over really well because you have that space, the large table, and you can really make it seem like something different or more than what you can typically do in the classroom. So, multiple books are going to be laid out, and I'm going to move on here. When you set the book talk up, you want to have lots and lots of different genres, lots of diverse authors, different types of characters, graphic novels, longer novels, shorter novels. You want to have that variety because you're going to have students who don't know for sure, what they're interested in and haven't read a book in a really long time. And so for them to have the opportunity to sit down, read the back of a book, flip through it, talk about the cover, talk with their friends about it, that is a great experience. And so what I thought was really cool, and I've seen this in my own experience, and I've seen lots of people blog about this in the past, but with book tastings, it's super simple to make it seem a little bit different than the typical lesson. I love my students and I love when I just put a poster in a different spot in the room or I add some lights and they always notice those things immediately. And I think they appreciate the change. And I think it's easy to do with this. You can add a tablecloth, some candles, maybe play some music in the background. That's going to make the experience more memorable, get them more excited about the books that they're going to be looking at. The benefits, just like book talks, are innumerable. It's easy prep. You don't have to have all the fancy stuff, the candles, the tablecloth, so on and so forth, but you could, and it's not that much if you wanted to. You have students getting exposure to new genres, fun for all grade levels, ensure students are knowledgeable about books available in the library. It's a great way for them to see that you had graphic novels. Students might not have realized that. And I've seen that for sure, or comic books even. And that being available to them is such a great gateway to where we want them to go. And it gets students excited and talking about books. And that's definitely what we want. And that's how we're going to create independent readers. Okay, lastly, we have book generators. Now, this was something that was new to me as I was doing my research and just this past year, even having some interactions with this. But a generator is going to help students find the right book for them. So, let's talk about what that looks like. So, even for adults, it can be challenging to find the right book, to find something that is going to interest us early on. And there are book generators out there. All you have to do is Google it, and you're going to get websites like the following posted here. But for students, and they could use these websites as well, and it would be a great starting place. But what the books that they're going to be recommended might not necessarily be available in their local library or even in their school library. So, because of that, the alternative is trying to create a book generator specifically for the school library. And so I know that many library catalogs I would say most, will sort those YA books into genres for us, which is great. But for many non readers, I've found that that isn't quite straightforward enough. I have lots of students who I direct them to the categories of dystopian, realistic, all these different categories, and they just kind of look at me because they've not read enough in the past few years to know what their preferred genre would be. And so our solution to that, my librarian and I collaborated this year, and we created two different ways, and there's more than this, but we created two different ways specifically that were very helpful in helping students find the right book for them. We use personality quizzes, and you can use brochures or bulletin boards, connections to pop culture to point students in the right direction. So the two things that we personally did were the personality quizzes, and we had a bulletin board up, and it did have that connection to pop culture as well, available to students in my classroom and in the library, where you could see if you like this type of Netflix show, or if you are more prone to do this on a Friday night versus this, you're probably going to like this book. And for instance, with the example, if you loved Outer Banks, try reading this. And I think this was just a great way for students to get to know themselves as people and as readers. At the beginning of the year, I didn't know my students very well, but as time went on and I got to know them and we formed those relationships and I heard what they were discussing, it got easier and easier to point them in the right direction with the quizzes, with the bulletin board, with recommendations based on their interests. But for a great starting point, when they don't know you very well and you don't know them, this is a great way to get to know their interests and to find a book that is going to correlate with their interests. Okay, so lastly, the impact. Why does independent reading matter? Why do book tastings matter? Book generators, so on and so forth. I think author Penny Kittle, she wrote Book Love, and she's a former English teacher and advocate of reading, puts it in the best way. She says the act of reading relieves stress and invites empathy. It can break through passivity and ignite curiosity, which drives deeper learning throughout the school day. And that is why independent reading matters. If we can convince students to read independently, to find a YA book, to find some book that is of interest to them, then we are going to see lots and lots of things change within the school system. And so these are just three simple ways. There's lots more, but these are three strategies to get you started. Programs that can be used in the library, that can be collaborated with teachers, with administration, to create that culture of reading. I included a parent testimonial that came to mind as I was creating this presentation. This was an email I received a few months back towards the end of the school year from a parent whose teenage son, who was a student of mine, had apparently told his mother about the books that they were reading independently in my class, talking about that he liked that opportunity. And yes, they still had to read Gatsby this year, but he also got to read Ender's Game, and he got to tell me about that and share his interest with me. And I think that this was the first year I had done something like that, and I think that it really made a huge difference in my students and my personal enjoyment of being at school and finding that love for reading again. So, next steps. What are you going to do with this information? What can you do to start implementing these strategies and to create independent readers in your school? Number one, you have to give students time to read and discuss what they're reading. So, yes, give them these books, find books they're interested in. Hopefully, they're reading them outside of school, but I think it's important that there is time for them to read in school as well, and to be in the library, to have that spot in the library that they're comfortable to sit for a while in the classroom, wherever, and read the books that they have connected with. You want to ensure that every student has access to a book at all times and really work to get the whole school on board. Make sure your other teachers know that students do have books to read if they have downtime. Just encouraging reading among the school, getting your staff, your colleagues to talk about what they're reading could make all the difference. And then lastly, the fourth bullet there, you want to make sure that you practice giving book talks, that you familiarize yourself with that process to see what that looks like. Um, Learning how to talk clearly and succinctly about a book and just have enough of that information shared to really grab students' attention. You want to work on creating a response sheet for book tastings because yes, it's great for them to look at the books, but if they don't have a way to record their thoughts as they are tasting those books and experimenting with them, then they're going to forget, which ones they were really drawn to. So whether that's just this is the title, this is how I feel about the cover, this is how I would rate it, this is what I liked about it, this is what I didn't based on what I've read. You want something for students to be able to write the responses on. And then lastly, you want to work on familiarizing yourself with YA literature so that you can create book generators for your students, but then also that one day that you yourself can be the book generator, that they can come to you and you know them, or you can ask their teacher and you can point them in the right direction and say, hey, this book has aliens in it. And you said you like aliens. So let's go over here and talk about this. Whatever it may be, you want to make sure that you're always familiarizing yourself with new YA Lit. And so lastly, here are my references for the information. And that is it. Thank you.